In a wildlife rehabilitation center deep in the Himalayan foothills of northern India, a veterinary team made a discovery that seemed to violate every rule of predator and prey. A golden retriever, gentle and domesticated, was lying in a large enclosure nursing 3 coal-black leopard cubs alongside her own 2 puppies. The cubs were barely 2 weeks old, their eyes still sealed shut, their tiny bodies covered in dark fur that would never show the distinctive rosettes of their spotted cousins. Their mother had been killed by poachers, leaving them crying in a cave with no chance of survival. Every attempt to bottle feed them had failed. They were hours from death when staff placed them near the dog as a last desperate measure. Within minutes, she had pulled all 3 cubs to her belly and begun nursing them as if they were her own. For the next 7 months, this golden retriever would raise 3 apex predators, teaching them to play, to socialize, and somehow, against all logic, preparing them to become wild. What happened when those leopards finally left her reveals something extraordinary about maternal love, about wildness, and about whether the lessons learned from a dog could ever translate to the jungle. This isn't a heartwarming fiction, this is documented science, and the ending will challenge everything you think you know about nature and nurture. The dog's name was Rupa, a 5-year-old golden retriever who had been living at the wildlife center for 2 years as a companion animal for staff. She'd given birth to 3 puppies 4 days before the leopard cubs arrived, but only 2 survived. Her body was producing abundant milk, her maternal hormones were at their peak, and when those 3 black shapes were placed in a basket near her enclosure, her response was immediate and powerful. Staff veterinarian Dr. Anjali Mehta watched through the observation window as Rupa stood, walked to the basket, sniffed each cub carefully, then began carrying them one by one to her nursing area. The leopard cubs were melanistic, meaning their fur carried a genetic mutation that produced excess pigment, making them appear completely black. In certain light, faint rosette patterns were visible beneath the dark coat, but to the casual observer, they looked like shadows made solid. At 2 weeks old, they weighed less than 2 pounds each. Their eyes wouldn't open for another week. They were entirely helpless, capable only of crying, crawling, and nursing. Dr. Mehta's immediate concern was nutrition. Dog milk and leopard milk have different compositions, different fat ratios, different protein structures, but analysis showed they were compatible enough for survival, especially supplemented with formula. More critical was the question no one could answer: what would these leopards become? The answer lies in how mammalian brains develop. When cubs are born, their neural pathways are remarkably unfinished. The architecture is genetic, but the wiring is built through experience. During the first 3 months of life, everything a cub experiences, sounds, smells, social behaviors, gets hardwired into developing neural circuits with unusual permanence. This is the imprinting window, when the brain is hypersensitive to environmental input and uses it to construct its model of reality. These 3 leopard cubs weren't experiencing leopard reality, they were experiencing dog reality. The sounds of barking and whimpering, the social dynamics of canine play, the scent of domestication. Rupa wasn't just feeding them, she was programming them at the neurological level, writing software over genetic hardware that couldn't be changed. The mechanism driving Rupa's behavior was pure biology. When female mammals give birth, their hypothalamus floods the brain with oxytocin and prolactin. These hormones don't just enable milk production, they fundamentally alter brain function. Threat assessment systems shut down. Species recognition becomes fuzzy. The maternal drive becomes so overwhelming that conscious choice barely factors in. When those leopard cubs cried near Rupa, their vocalizations triggered the same neural response as her own puppies. Her brain processed infant in distress, maternal response required. Everything else was noise. This same mechanism creates seemingly impossible bonds throughout the animal kingdom. In Thailand, a pig at a zoo adopted and nursed tiger cubs after their mother died, despite pigs being natural prey for tigers. In Australia, a Great Dane nursed a litter of orphaned kangaroo joeys, letting them climb into her fur as if it were a pouch. In Russia, a cat fostered baby hedgehogs, grooming their spines as if they were soft kitten fur, never once recoiling from what should have triggered a pain response. Perhaps most remarkably, in Kenya, a lioness adopted a baby oryx antelope, carrying it with her pride for 2 weeks and defending it from other lions before it finally escaped back to its herd. The lioness had recently lost cubs. Her prolactin levels were still elevated, her maternal circuits still firing, and when that oryx calf appeared, crying and vulnerable, her brain couldn't distinguish threat from offspring. But here's what people consistently misunderstand about these stories. We see cross-species adoption and assume the animals are choosing compassion, making moral decisions to help. We project human altruism onto biological imperatives. The truth is more complex and more profound. Rupa wasn't deciding to be heroic. Her neurochemistry had been hijacked by hormones so powerful that her behavior became compulsory. She couldn't have walked away from those crying cubs any more than she could have chosen to stop breathing. This doesn't diminish what she did, it explains why it was possible at all. Evolution created maternal responses so robust, so fail-safe, that occasional false positives, caring for the wrong species, are less costly than any risk of false negatives, which would mean ignoring your own offspring. As weeks became months, the leopard cubs grew at an astonishing rate. By 8 weeks, they were the same size as the puppies. By 12 weeks, they were larger. They played with the puppies using a mix of feline and canine behaviors, pouncing like cats, but also play-bowing like puppies, chasing like leopards, but also wrestling like puppies. Rupa treated all 5 babies identically, grooming them, disciplining them when play got too rough, calling them back with a specific bark when they wandered too far. Dr. Mehta documented something unexpected. The leopard cubs were learning dog communication. They responded to Rupa's barks with appropriate behavior, coming when called, stopping play when she gave a warning vocalization. They were becoming, in every observable way, bilingual, genetically leopard but culturally canine. At 4 months, genetics began asserting itself. The leopards started climbing with a power and precision the puppies couldn't match. They began stalking behavior during play, low crouches, slow approaches, explosive pounces that had nothing to do with what Rupa had taught them. Their vocalizations shifted from puppy-like whines to something deeper, more guttural. The genetic blueprint was emerging, written in code that no amount of dog rearing could erase. Dr. Mehta made a crucial decision. At 5 months, she began introducing leopard-specific enrichment, elevated platforms, large prey-scented objects, recorded leopard vocalizations. The cubs responded with immediate intensity. When they heard leopard calls, they would freeze, ears forward, then begin producing similar sounds. It was as if a dormant program had been activated, waiting all along for the right trigger. At 7 months, the separation process began. The leopards were moved to a larger enclosure designed for wildcat rehabilitation, where they could see and smell other leopards but remained isolated for gradual introduction. Rupa showed initial distress, pacing, whining at the fence, but within 3 days, her attention returned fully to her puppies. Her maternal hormones were naturally declining as her biological offspring matured. The chemical bond that made her care for the leopards was dissolving, replaced by the normal dog-puppy relationship. The leopards adapted with surprising speed. Within 2 weeks of introduction to other young leopards, they were communicating fluently, scent marking, proper body language, accurate vocalizations. The dog behaviors retreated almost completely, surfacing only in occasional play-bowing, a ghost of Rupa's lessons that would fade with time. 18 months after Rupa first nursed them, the 3 black leopards were released into a protected forest reserve in Uttarakhand. They wore radio collars for monitoring. For the first 6 months, Dr. Mehta's team tracked their progress daily. All 3 established territories. All 3 hunted successfully. All 3 avoided human contact with appropriate wariness. Camera trap footage showed them behaving as completely wild leopards, indistinguishable from those raised by their own mothers. There was one exception documented in year 2 of monitoring. When researchers played recorded dog barks near the leopard's territories, all 3 showed unusual responses. They didn't flee or attack. They paused, listened, then moved away calmly. It was a neutral response, neither threat nor friend, encoded during those first 7 months when dog sounds meant mother, safety, home. Rupa lived to age 11, spending her final years as a beloved companion at the Wildlife Center. Staff who worked with her said she never showed particular interest in leopards again, never seemed to remember or seek out the 3 black cubs she'd raised.
Hormones built a bridge between domestic and wild that saved 3 lives. When those leopards walked into the forest, they carried the gift of those first 7 months, the weeks that made all the other weeks possible. They didn't need to remember Rupa. They needed only what she gave them, survival until genetics could take over. The wild doesn't care how you arrive. It cares only that you arrive ready. These 3 did. If you believe that sometimes the most unlikely savior is exactly the right one, hit that like button and subscribe. The real world writes better stories than we ever could.